Claire Weston pushed open the glass door of the old lakeside hotel, shaking raindrops from her coat as a cold gust followed her inside. She hadn't planned to spend this weekend here, certainly not alone, and definitely not with her stepson Evan. But life had a way of shifting suddenly. And this weekend was one of those shifts that came without warning. The lobby glowed softly with warm light from the stone fireplace, its flames crackling like they were welcoming her into a memory she didn't realize she needed. Claire took a deep breath, letting the warmth settle around her. What she wanted more than anything was for her husband, Daniel, to walk through the door behind her. But he was thousands of miles away, stuck on a business trip that kept extending day after day. She scanned the room, expecting it to be empty, but instead she saw him, Ivan, her stepson. 23 years old, tall, thoughtful, and carrying. A quiet heaviness she had been noticing for months. He stood by the fireplace, hands buried in his pockets, his shoulders stiff as if the weight on them had settled long ago and never left. Claire walked toward him, trying to read his expression. Before he turned, Evan had never been a loud or dramatic person, but when something troubled him, he became even quieter, retreating behind a wall she could feel but couldn't break. She didn't want to push him, but she also knew the distance between them had grown too much to ignore. "Hey," she said softly, setting her bag down. He looked up slowly. His eyes, usually calm and steady, held something she couldn't name. Worry, guilt, fear. Maybe all of them at once. "Hey," he answered, but his voice wasn't casual. It held a seriousness that made Claire's heart shift. She suddenly felt that this weekend, originally meant to be a quiet family break, would be anything but quiet. The rain pounded harder outside, tapping against the tall windows like it was urging the truth forward. Claire shrugged off her coat and moved next to him, letting the warmth from the fire brush against her cold hands. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Evan said after a moment. His tone was neutral, but the way his fingers tapped against his leg revealed nerves. "Your message sounded important," Claire replied. "I didn't want to ignore that." He nodded, staring deeper into the flames. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't peaceful either. It was full of things waiting to be said. Claire felt like she was standing on the edge of a conversation he had been holding inside for too long. She studied him quietly. Evan had grown into an adult, independent and thoughtful. But ever since last year, something had changed. He visited less, spoke less, avoided family gatherings, and kept conversations short. Daniel had noticed too, but every time he asked, Evan brushed it off with a tired smile. Now, in this quiet hotel lobby, Claire finally understood that whatever was pulling him away was deeper than she realized. "You okay?" she asked gently. He hesitated, his jaw tightened. His gaze stayed fixed on the fire. "Not really," he finally admitted. "And I haven't been for a while." Claire wasn't surprised by the admission, but hearing it out loud hit differently. She waited, letting him choose his pace. She had learned long ago that trying to force a confession from someone only made the truth hide further. Evan shifted his weight, exhaling slowly. "I didn't know how to talk about it. That's why this weekend matters. I need to tell you something." The air changed immediately. Claire felt her heartbeat quicken not out of fear, but anticipation. She could feel the seriousness of his words settle in the room like another presence. "What do you need to tell me?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the dark storm outside as if searching for the right words. His silence wasn't evasive, was careful, thoughtful, heavy. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were filled with something she didn't expect. Pain blended with a strange kind of relief, like he was finally ready to let go of something that had been tightening inside him for months. "There's something I've been hiding," he said. "Something that started a long time ago, and I thought I could handle it on my own, but I can't anymore." Claire's chest tightened. She thought about all the possibilities: trouble at work, Financial stress, issues with friends, or maybe something connected to Daniel. The uncertainty made her stomach twist. But she didn't interrupt. She simply nodded, letting him know she was listening. Evan swallowed hard. And I didn't just call you here because Dad was away. I called you because I didn't know how to talk to him about it without understanding how you would react first. A flicker of surprise ran through her. Claire and Evan had shared many quiet conversations over the years, but he had always gone to Daniel for the big things. That he chose her now meant whatever he carried was deeply personal. "What's going on?" she asked softly, before he could answer. A loud clap of thunder echoed outside. The sound made both of them look toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass in long, uneven lines, casting shadows across the room. Evan took a slow, steady breath. His hand trembled slightly before he tucked it back into his pocket. "I promise I'll tell you everything," he said. "Just not yet. I need to find the right way to say it." Claire understood. She felt it in her bones. This wasn't something that could be rushed. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't small, and it wasn't simple. But the weight of his words settled. In her mind, there was a secret. It mattered, and it involved their family. Evan stepped back from the fireplace, his expression shifting between fear and determination. "I'm glad you came," he said. "This weekend, it's important. It's more than I can explain right now." Claire nodded, feeling the truth of his words even without the details. She didn't push. She didn't question further. Instead, she simply said, "I'm here." And for the first time that night, Evan's shoulders relaxed. Just a little. The storm outside kept raging, but inside that warm hotel lobby, a moment of honesty had finally begun. A moment that would soon unravel everything Claire thought she understood. Something was coming. And she wasn't ready for it. But she knew one thing for certain: this weekend was going to change their family forever. Dinner at the Lakeside Hotel was quiet except for the soft hum of conversation from other guests and the clinking of dishes from the kitchen. Claire and Evan sat at a small corner table near a window where the rain slid down like silver threads. The storm hadn't eased, and the wind rattled the window frames every few minutes, adding a restless rhythm to the room. It felt like the weather was echoing everything left unsaid between them. Evan barely touched his food. He moved his fork around the plate, pushing pieces of chicken from one side to the other. Claire watched him, feeling a sharper worry now. He looked like someone holding too many things inside. It's like someone afraid to let them spill out. "You're quiet," she said gently. He forced a small smile. Just tired, but she could see the truth behind his words. His shoulders were tense. His eyes were distant. His mind wasn't here. It was somewhere far, somewhere heavy. Claire leaned forward slightly. "You asked me to come. I know there's something you want to say?" His fingers tightened around his glass. "I know. I'm trying to figure out how." Lightning flashed outside, bright enough to illuminate the entire dining room for a second. It revealed a brief flicker of fear in his face, fear he couldn't hide fast enough. "Evan," Claire said, keeping her voice steady, "you don't have to rush, but you don't have to hold everything alone either." He exhaled a long, tired breath. "I didn't plan for this to feel so hard." "What part?" "All of it," he whispered. For a moment, they both fell silent. The clatter from the kitchen, the soft music playing overhead, the murmur of other guests said all faded into background noise. Claire was focused on the young man in front of her, the one she had watched grow from a quiet teenager into an adult carrying more weight than he should. "Does this have to do with why you've been distant?" she asked. He nodded once. "And why you stopped coming home for dinner?" Another nod. "And Dad?" she added carefully. This time he hesitated, but he eventually nodded again. Claire felt a tightness settle in her chest. "I see," she whispered. He took another breath, but it shook slightly. "I didn't want to make anything worse. Didn't want to disappoint either of you." "You haven't disappointed anyone," she said quickly. "You don't know that? Then tell me." His eyes lowered to his plate, and for a moment it seemed like he might finally speak. But instead, he pushed his chair back. "Can we go somewhere else?" he asked. "Somewhere quieter, of course." They stepped out of the dining room and walked toward the lounge. The hallway smelled like cedar and old books, a comforting scent that softened the air. The hotel had an old charm, with its wooden beams and warm-colored walls. And the soft carpet under their feet made their steps almost silent. Evan seemed more restless now. He kept his hands in his pockets, his steps quick but uncertain, like he was walking toward something he wasn't ready to face. When they reached the lounge, a single lamp glowed beside a long sofa, filling the room with soft amber light. Rain tapped gently on the wide windows, quieter here than in the dining room. The fireplace was unlit, but the room still felt warm. They sat across from each other, a small table between them. Claire waited. Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. "I didn't ask you here because of the hotel, or because of the storm, or because Dad's gone. I asked because I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and Claire's heart sank. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said. He closed his eyes and nodded slowly. "I know. That's why this is the only place I felt I could start." She didn't interrupt. She knew he needed space to continue. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath that sounded almost like frustration. "I've been carrying a lot, more than I told anyone. I tried to handle it myself, but it kept getting worse." "What got worse?" "Everything," he whispered. "It's my job, my confidence, my relationship with Dad. Even coming home felt different." "Different how?" "Felt like I didn't belong anymore." His honesty hit her harder than she expected. Claire had sensed his distance, but never imagined he felt like an outsider in his own family. "You always belong," she said firmly. He shook his head. "That's easy for you to say, you and Dad. You have your life together. I didn't want to be the problem in it. If you're not a problem, you don't know what I've been hiding. Then tell me." He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "It's not that simple." "It can be," she said softly. For a moment, he said nothing. Only the sound of the rain filled the room. Then finally he looked up, and the vulnerability in his eyes made Claire's throat tighten. "There were things going wrong," he began. "Things I didn't know how to fix. Oh, I felt like I was losing control of everything. I didn't want Dad to worry, and I didn't want you to think I was failing. So I shut down. I avoided calls. I stopped showing up. And the more I hid, the harder it became to come back." Claire understood now. This wasn't about anger or rebellion. This was about fear. Fear of disappointing the people he loved. Fear of falling short in a family he respected. "You should have come to us," she said gently. "I was embarrassed," he admitted. "And I thought, if Dad knew everything, he'd think less of me. And if you knew, you'd see me as someone who couldn't handle life." "Would never think that," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "But it felt safer to disappear," he whispered, "even if it hurt." The truth settled heavily between them. Evan hadn't been pulling away because of resentment or anger. He had been drowning quietly, trying not to disturb the people he loved. Claire wanted to reach across the table, but held back, giving him space. "You don't need to hide anymore," she said. He nodded slowly, but his expression told her there was more, something deeper. Something he wasn't ready to reveal just yet. "Claire," he said suddenly, eyes locked on hers, "there's a part of this story I'm still scared to say." She felt a quiet chill move through her. "Whenever you're ready." He didn't speak again. Instead, he leaned back, breathing slowly like he was preparing himself for something big. Something he had kept buried for far too long. The storm. Outside softened, but the storm inside the lounge inside him was only growing. And Claire knew one thing. The truth he carried was going to change everything. The lounge felt smaller now, as if the walls were slowly moving inward. The soft lamp on the side table cast long shadows on the carpet, and the rain outside had turned into a steady whisper. Claire sat quietly, waiting. Evan's silence wasn't empty. She could feel the weight of it, the way his thoughts were gathering, pushing him toward a truth he had avoided for too long. He leaned forward again, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. His breathing was uneven, not dramatic, just strained, like someone trying to keep steady while standing on shaking ground. "I didn't tell you everything earlier," he said quietly. "I know," Claire replied gently. "This next part, it's the hardest." She didn't push him. She simply nodded, letting him feel safe enough to continue. He stared at the floor for a long moment before speaking again. "Last year, I overheard Dad talking on the phone about selling the house." Claire felt her breath stop. She remembered that conversation. Daniel had talked about selling the house to buy a place closer to his office. But they had eventually dropped the idea when things got busy. It wasn't a secret. It just never became a serious plan. But for Evan, hearing only a small part of the conversation must have felt different. "I thought it was because of me," he said. "I thought maybe I was the reason he wanted to move. Maybe I didn't fit into his new life anymore." "That's not true," Claire said quickly. He nodded. "I know that now. But back then, all I heard was him saying he needed less stress, and I assumed I was the stress." Claire's heart tightened. "Evan, you were never the reason." He looked down. "It didn't feel that way." The lounge was silent, except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Claire watched him carefully, seeing how the memory still hurt him. "That's when I started pulling away," he continued. "I stopped coming over because I felt like I was intruding. I felt like Dad didn't want me there, and I didn't want to make you feel like you had to act polite around me." "You never intruded," Claire whispered. "Maybe not to you," he said softly. "But in my mind, I convinced myself I was the extra piece, the one everyone had to rearrange their life around." He spoke with a quiet sadness that made Claire feel an ache in her chest. She wished she could go back and erase every moment he felt unwanted. "I'm sorry you carried that alone," she said. He shook his head. "There's more." Claire braced herself, sitting a little straighter. "Things got worse," he admitted. "A lot worse. I didn't just withdraw because of the house. I was struggling at work too." He paused, gathering strength. "I lost my job." The words fell like a stone. Claire inhaled sharply. "You never told us." "I couldn't," he said. "I felt ashamed. I had been there for 2 years, and then suddenly everything went wrong. I made mistakes. I got overwhelmed. And when they let me go, I told myself I deserved it." "You didn't deserve that," she said firmly. "But that's how it felt," he replied, "like I was failing every part of my life at the same time." Claire saw now how the distance had grown, how the weight had built up. He had been carrying guilt, fear, stress, and loneliness all at once. "What did you do after losing the job?" she asked softly. "I tried pretending I still had it," he said. "I woke up every morning and left the house like normal. I didn't want to tell Dad. I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want you to look at me differently." "I wouldn't have," Claire said. "I know that now," he whispered. "But back then, I thought I was already falling behind everyone else. So I hid everything. I told myself I'd fix it before you found out." Claire could feel her heart breaking for him, not in a dramatic or romantic way, but in a human way. He had struggled quietly, hoping no one noticed the cracks. "How long were you pretending?" she asked. "Months," he said. "I spent most of my days in libraries, cafes, anywhere I could sit without having to explain myself. I applied for jobs, but nothing worked out. My confidence disappeared. I stopped answering calls because I didn't want anyone hearing how lost I sounded." Claire blinked away a sudden warmth in her eyes. "Why didn't you ever come to us?" "I thought I had to prove I could handle life on my own," he said. "I thought if I came to you both with a failure, you'd feel tired of me. We would never feel that way." "I see that now," he said, voice breaking a little. "But back then, the fear felt real." He looked toward the window, watching the rain blur the lights outside. "And when I finally got a part-time job 2 months ago, I still didn't tell you. I felt too far away by then. Too disconnected. I didn't know how to come back after disappearing for so long. Claire leaned forward slightly, her voice soft. You came back. That's what matters. He nodded slowly. But she could see how hard this entire confession had been. There was a long pause before he spoke again. There's one more thing, he said. Claire's stomach tightened. Go on. This weekend wasn't just about telling you the truth, he said. I needed to hear. If I still had a place with you and Dad. If I still mattered. The vulnerability in his voice made her heart twist. You have always mattered. I wasn't sure, he whispered. Not when everything inside me was falling apart. Claire finally reached out this time, placing her hand gently over his. He didn't pull away. You didn't lose us, she said quietly. You were just lost for a while. He looked up, and in his eyes she saw something that had been missing for months. Hope. Fragile, small, but there. Do you think Dad would forgive me for disappearing? He asked. He never needed forgiveness, she said. He only wanted you home. Evan exhaled slowly, like a heavy breath had finally escaped. That's why I asked you to come, he said softly. I needed to know if I could fix things. If I could talk to him without feeling like a failure. You can, she said. And you should, he nodded, inhaling deeply. His shoulders eased slightly as if the truth had finally released its grip on him. Claire watched him carefully. She knew he wasn't fully healed yet. But this was a beginning, a real one. And as the rain continued outside, she realized something important. This weekend wasn't just unexpected. It was necessary. It was the turning point he needed. And it was the moment she understood just how deeply their family needed to rebuild. The truth had surfaced. But the healing was just beginning. The next morning arrived quietly, with soft sunlight pushing through the thin curtains of the hotel room. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a gentle calm that felt almost unreal. Claire stepped out into the hallway, the carpet warm beneath her feet, and found Evan sitting alone in one of the lounge chairs. He looked different, not fully relieved, but lighter. As if sharing the truth had finally allowed him to breathe. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Morning, he said softly. Morning, she replied. There was still a hesitation in his eyes, a leftover shadow from everything he had confessed the night before. But now there was also something new, determination. Like he had finally reached the edge of something he could step past. Did you sleep at all? Claire asked gently. Not much, he admitted. But I feel clearer. She sat across from him. The early sun cast a warm glow over the room, making everything look softer. Are you ready for today? She asked. He nodded slowly. I think so. But I'm scared. That's normal, she said. But you're not alone in it. Evan looked down at his hands. I want to talk to Dad. I want to tell him everything. But I'm afraid he'll think I'm weak. Your father isn't the kind of man who judges weakness, she said. He's the kind who wants to be there for you. Evan took a deep breath. I hope so. Claire paused, then added, he loves you more than you know. Those words seemed to settle into him. He didn't look convinced yet, but he looked willing to try. And that was enough. They spent the morning walking around the hotel grounds. The lake glimmered in the new sunlight, still and calm after the storm. The trees dripped with leftover rain, and the air smelled clean and fresh. Evan walked slowly beside Claire, hands tucked into his pockets. His posture more relaxed than the night before. I didn't expect to feel this. Okay, he admitted quietly. What changed? She asked. I think saying everything out loud made it real, he replied. And once it was real, it wasn't as scary as I thought. Claire nodded. Hiding pain always makes it heavier. He looked at her, gratitude in his eyes. Thanks for listening yesterday. Never have to thank me for that, she said. That's what family is for. He smiled, small but genuine. It was the first real smile she had seen on him in months, as they walked toward the back terrace. Evan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out, glanced at the screen, and froze. It's Dad. He whispered. Claire watched the way his fingers tightened around the phone, the way his breath caught in his chest. This was the moment he had been running from for a long time. Answer it. she said softly. Evan hesitated, then pressed the phone to his ear. Hey, Dad. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. Claire stood nearby, giving him space but staying close enough that he knew he wasn't facing this alone. There was a long pause as Daniel spoke on the other end. Evan's eyes softened. Yeah, I'm okay, he said. I'm with Claire. Another pause. Evan swallowed hard. No, nothing's wrong, he said quickly. I wanted to talk to you. The conversation was short, simple, gentle. When Evan hung up, he looked at Claire with a mix of relief and nervousness. He said he's flying back tonight, he said quietly. He wants to meet us. That's good, Claire said. Evan nodded, but she could see the fear returning. What if he's upset with me? Then let him be upset, she said softly. It won't last. What matters is that he wants to come home to you. Later that evening, they checked out of the hotel and drove home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. Evan stared out the window, tapping his fingers lightly, lost in thought. For the first time, Claire felt hopeful about the distance that had built between him and his father. It wasn't gone yet, but it was fading. When they pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on. A rental car sat parked beside Claire's. Evan froze the moment he saw it. He's here, he whispered. Claire touched his arm gently. You're ready? He nodded once, then stepped out of the car. Daniel opened the front door just as they approached. He looked exhausted from travel, but the moment his eyes landed on Evan, something softened in his expression, confusion, worry, and love, all tangled together. Hey, Daniel said quietly. Hey, Evan replied, voice tight with emotion. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Daniel stepped forward and pulled his son into a tight embrace. Evan stiffened in surprise before slowly relaxing into it. I thought I lost you, Daniel whispered. Evan shook his head, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You don't have to be sorry, Daniel said, holding him tighter. You just had to come home. Claire felt a sting in her eyes as she watched them. It wasn't dramatic. It was human, simple, real. A moment of a family rebuilding what had been quietly falling apart. When they finally pulled apart, Evan wiped his eyes and let out a shaky laugh. I thought you'd be disappointed in me. Never, Daniel said. You're my son. Nothing changes that. They went inside together, the warmth of the house wrapping around them like a long-missed comfort. Claire made tea while the two of them sat at the kitchen table. Evan told Daniel everything, his fear about the house, losing the job, the months he spent pretending, the pressure, the isolation. And Daniel listened with patience, with pain, and with love. When Evan finished, he looked down at the table. I didn't want to be a burden. I don't care about problems, Daniel said gently. I care about you. I just wish you hadn't carried it alone. Evan nodded, eyes filled with guilt and relief. Claire joined them, sitting beside them both. This is what matters, she said, talking, being honest, staying connected. Daniel reached for Evan's hand. We're going to fix this together. The word together seemed to settle something deep inside Evan, for the first time. Claire saw peace in him, a real, lasting peace. Later that night, after the conversations quieted and the house grew still, Evan looked at Claire with sincere gratitude. Thank you for coming to the hotel, he said softly. I don't think I could have done this without you. You didn't need me to fix anything, she said. You just needed someone to listen. And you listened, he replied. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was something deeper: family, healing, trust, returning, hearts softening. And it was enough. That weekend didn't bring scandal or chaos. It brought truth. It brought connection. It brought understanding. And in the end, it brought something even more important. A chance for their family to start again, together,